This conference will
start
now be
triage.
recorded.
Start triage because a lot of folks. It sucks because they're very, very specific about their stuff. Joe!
I was gonna walk out there and tell him.
I don't know, just like yelling at people from across the. Come on back now, you hear? So, just so everybody's aware, this is your final test. Yeah. On May 17th. So this is your final test. Go home and study. I would, like I said about the skill sheets, I would absolutely hate for you to make it this far into this class and fail out over a final. But we're not going to set you up for failure. We're going to help you, but we're not going to set you up for failure by sending you off to National Registry to waste hundreds and hundreds of dollars just for you to fail out. That also doesn't make any sense. So if you fail twice, your third time taking the test, we'll help you study. We'll review your stuff. Honestly, we're we're thinking about doing it exactly like National Registry, where you'll take the test, we'll go through and grade it, and you get a pass or fail text message. That's all you get. That's what National Registry does. They don't tell you what you failed. They don't tell you what you passed. They don't tell you how good you did. Nothing. If you pass or fail, you get a message on the little National Registry website that says, "Congratulations, you have passed your National Registry license to be an emergency medical technician." Or it says, "Sorry for your luck, you failed." So
It doesn't actually say congratulations, you passed. Because the first time I stared at it and it told me that I passed, all it says is examination scored, and that means that you passed. And I'm sitting there Googling, like, what does examination scored mean? That means you passed.
yeah.
It doesn't even say, like, word for word you passed.
No, no. National Registry is like, "Oh, you thought? No, you still suck." You're like, man. That's like me and Becca. I really wanted to know how close I was to her on that test, just for like my own like self-conscious issues, but they wouldn't tell me. So I know I didn't do near as good as she did, but I still passed. So, counts for something.
I have seen some TikToks where it says, like, the girl was, like, a design and it gave them, like, a 192.
Yeah, it'll give you like a little
Just
score.
what it looks like on the NRH website.
And I
So
think
this
that
is
the
just blank,
passing score
and then
now
like
is like a
refresh, and then it'll finally say examination
950. Is
scored.
that what it is?
And
And so it'll tell
if
you
you
like
didn't
you
pass
got
it,
like a
it'll prompt
920,
you to
but it
reschedule
won't tell
your
you what
test.
you sucked at. It won't tell you what you did good at. The old National Registry would. It would break it down into
I've never
sections.
failed
Tell
one
you
yet,
that you
so
failed operations,
that's what it looks
you
like.
failed cardiology, like you failed all the different sections or whatever. The new National Registry doesn't do that. If you fail the test, it just gives you like a little score at the bottom that says like you made a 920 out of 950, you failed. So, and then if you pass, they don't give you the score. Pissed me off. So, yeah, we don't know what we made. So, last day of class, well, last day of lectures. Everybody excited? I don't know. I'm just glad that me and Becca don't have to freaking stare at a computer every freaking day.
Yeah.
Honestly, the fact that we don't have to make tests and make PowerPoints every day is pretty nice.
Yeah, we're done with it.
Honestly, it kind of works out though, because our next class, we don't have to sit over here and make all the PowerPoints. They're already done. We just got to make all the backside work and homework and tests. And so, y'all were kind of the guinea pig. So, good luck. See how it goes. But everybody's done pretty good.
Like I said, the Cahoots is very suggestive toward your final. I'm not saying that they're word for word, but they're in the same realm. So if there's a question on the Cahoots that you're like, I have no freaking idea, I would suggest studying that topic.
Cool. All ready? So our last two sections are going to be highway safety, extrication, and then the last one's going to be mass casualty or weapons of mass destruction, terrorism bullcrap. So just so y'all know, you're about to take a terrorism class right here, and whenever you apply for your state license, you're going to have to take another one. on the website, there's two classes that you have to take whenever you apply for your state license. It's patients with special needs, which kind of emphasizes patients with Down syndrome and autism, stuff like that. And then you have to take a terrorism class as well. Both of them are pretty short, they're like an hour long.
They're one timers.
Is that what it is? Yeah.
I'm pretty sure. I can confirm, but
Yeah, I think
it
they're
said-
one.
It says on the state website, like once you've taken this, you don't need to take it again.
Yeah. And so once you take it, you just like upload it onto the state website. It's pretty easy. They're not like super in depth or
Every
super
time you
intensive.
recycle,
So
just the once. Oh, so that might be good for your next one. Maybe. I can confirm. Yeah, you should be. I would
Cool.
guess.
all right, highway safety, highway emergency operations. That yellow looks a little weird. It's
It's
all right.
hard to see.
Yeah. All right. So, traffic at highway incidents are one of the highest risk things that we deal with in the job. Whether you're on the interstate, whether you're responding to a little crash in a four-way intersection, the looky-loos, people not paying attention. If you look at the news, fire trucks, police cars, sheriff's cars, ambulances are always getting hit by something. So we got to be safe when we're dealing with traffic. You don't want to get smushed between two cars out there dealing with traffic, right? So you need to be cognizant of your responsibility. You also need to be aware of your surroundings and what makes that scene either safe or unsafe, depending on where you're dealing with these incidents, right? So limit your apparatuses on the interstate to what you need. I don't need 10 fire trucks and ambulances and police cars on the interstate for a single vehicle that slid off in the middle of a snowstorm, right? You want vehicles out there to help you block, a couple of lights on scene just to let people know you're out there, but you don't need to overwhelm the roads with a bunch of cars, because then you're just giving people more stuff to look at when they're not looking at their telephone. When you're the first arriving unit, where's the rest of my keys? You got the rest of my keys?
Mhm.
Oh, okay. I was like, this man just stole my key ring. So when you're the first arriving unit on scene, you want to be, I forgot the quotations, a blocking vehicle, right? If you're the first arriving unit in an ambulance, you want to use that unit to kind of block off traffic from the incident. But as soon as you get a chance, you need to move that apparatus to a safer location. Whether the sheriff's department shows up and blocks behind you, the fire truck show up and block behind you, whatever the case may be, once another vehicle shows up behind you, you need to move your apparatus into a safer location because you don't want to be loading and unloading patients in the middle of the interstate while traffic's coming at your back. And then if we're dealing with highway incidents, incidents out on the roadway, of course, we want to clear these up as soon as possible. We don't want to shut down the interstates and 305 any longer than we have to. DOT and NHP get kind of freaking pissed off at you. I don't really care, but some people do. But you want to open up traffic as soon as you can, right? Who, Aiken? Yeah, he's all right. He got a weird mustache, but he's pretty cool. Yeah. So, vehicle extrications are the most common type of rescue responses in the U.S. And what this basically means is, when you're dealing with rescues, whether it be high angle rescues, trench rescues, dive rescues, whatever it is, your most common type of rescue that you're going to be dealing with as an emergency responders is going to be extrication. Obviously, that changes with the environment. I don't think that BLM in the mountains is going to be extricating a lot of people out of four-door sedans. They might. If they are, I feel like they have other issues, but commonly this is the most common rescue you're going to be dealing with. So when it comes to apparatus placement in these situations, if everybody knows this, right, the most expensive vehicle on the road is always going to be used as the blocking vehicle, the fire truck. Why? because it's the biggest, and it could take the biggest impact, right? So when you arrive on scene, depending on where this is, and I know Austin can't see it, but you want your ambulance kind of towards the front of everybody else, because when you're loading and unloading these patients, you kind of have that patient compartment out away from traffic, as well as you have a couple of vehicles blocking you. That way somebody don't run into the back of you while you're loading this patient, and now you, your patient, your partner are all squished between this car and the ambulance. So if fire's on scene, great. Generally speaking, you want to block either 1 or 1.5 lanes of traffic, up to 2 lanes of traffic, depending on the incident. You just keep stacking them up from there. If it's a single lane incident, you can get away with kind of blocking 1.5 lanes. But whenever you set up these apparatuses, you want to set them up to kind of throw vehicles away from you. So this incident right here, the car is on the right shoulder. So the fire truck is pointed out to the left. That way, if somebody comes down and smacks him, it throws that vehicle out to the left and away from your incident, right? Same thing. Whenever you park, if you notice his wheels are turned as far as they can to the left, because if they're turned to the right and somebody smacks him right there, it's just going to push that fire truck to the right, and then he's going to come through and smack the cop car right there, right? So make sure you're placing these apparatuses in an appropriate location. I personally know people that have had ambulances hit on the highway, fire trucks hit on the highway. Atlanta firefighter, lost both of his legs from an incident like this on the interstate. So just be careful when you're on these incidents. So when you're exiting your vehicle, you want to exit into the safe zone as quickly as possible. If you are the driver and you're stepping out into traffic, don't step out into traffic and then do freaking jumping jacks in the middle of the street. Get the freak out of the road. And then, kind of get yourself over into that incident. Check for traffic before you're exiting the vehicle. People don't pay attention. Again, they'll sideswipe you. They'll be too close to you. So make sure you're looking for cars coming before you get out of the car or get out of the truck. Wear your appropriate PPE. So here we have those high-vis vests. We also have the high-vis jackets that you see in the hallway down there. Some places require you to wear helmets when you get out of the truck on the interstate. We don't have helmets. If you want a helmet, go buy one, I guess. But just wear your PPE, because if you get hit by a vehicle while dealing with an incident on the interstate and you're not wearing your high-vis vest, insurance won't cover you and you'll be on your own. So be mindful of that. If fire department's on scene, most of the time they'll put out cones or flares or whatever they have. Around here, they probably don't use flares very often, the whole like wildfire thing. But cones, kind of directing people away from the incident, right? Giving them a good buffer so that hopefully it directs them away from them before they run into the back of the fire truck. So with your night operations, your most appropriate lights to use on night scenes is red and amber. Here we don't have amber lights. We have red, blue, and white. But whenever you get on these scenes, shut off your headlights, shut off your scene lights that are directing towards traffic. So if you need scene lights on the side of the ambulance, just make sure they're directed away from traffic and towards your incident, because those white lights are kind of blinding, and people kind of lose the white lights and the emergency lights in the darkness. So shut off all your what's considered white lights, which are your headlights and your scene lights and stuff like that. That may impair the vision of people coming up on you. And of course, keep your emergency lights on. Traffic boards. Some fire departments that have a lot more money than we do have traffic boards that they carry around on these incidents. They'll set them up. DOT will come out for like large incidents when there's going to be a lot of cleanup, semi trucks, stuff like that. They'll put out traffic boards to kind of deter people away from stuff long before they get there. So And then phases of vehicle extrication. So this particular service, we carry extrication tools on our ambulance. If you go to Humboldt County, they do all of their own extrication on the ambulance. The fire department doesn't do any of that. Our fire department will respond. But since we are a volunteer fire department, if something happens and everybody's tied up, we do carry a combi tool, extrication tool on our truck to where we can kind of get ourselves out of small situations if we need to, pop doors, roll a little dash, stuff like that. It's not going to do any kind of massive extrication, but it can kind of get you by in small incidents. So you need to know how to do this if you come work for a place like this. So the first part of this is preparing for the rescue, getting your PPE on. A lot of places won't allow you to go near these incidences without helmets and some sort of like cut protective gear, of course, fire gear, turnout gear, stuff like that. So just be mindful of that if you work in a place. I know Humboldt County's got like helmets. They've got like education gear that they wear if they get involved in this stuff. So be mindful of that whenever you're going out and doing these extrications, just to make sure, because there's a lot of sharp objects that you're going to be dealing with, a lot of sharp metal, glass. So you don't want to get out there and cut yourself all up. So put on your PPE, get out all your tools beforehand, all the tools you may think you need beforehand, and set them around the vehicle so that they're within close proximity of the vehicle and you're not having to run back and forth to grab stuff out of the truck. Recognize and manage any hazards. So if there's any sort of like fuel leakage, if the batteries are still connected, be mindful of that, especially with a lot of front end damage. Those can lead to like sparks. If things touch things they ain't supposed to, they can lead to sparks, ignition of fuel, stuff like that. Fluids, radiator fluid and stuff like that a lot of times will be hot, so be careful. Don't go over there and stick your hand up under the running water and see what it tastes like. And then stabilize the vehicle prior to entering. So there's a couple of ways that you can do this. The most effective way for us on the ambulance, since we don't carry a lot of things, is just go over there and bust all the tires out of it. All right. If I'm cutting your car up, the tires are the least of your concerns. So I'm gonna walk over there. We have the Halligan tools. If you don't know what a Halligan is, it's like an entry tool for like doorways, but it's got a little sharp pulling on one side of it. You can just walk over there and smack it against the side of a tire and bust all the tires out. It'll settle the car on the ground, less likely to roll away from you, right? So where the fire department, they have cribbing, they have blocks, they have all kinds of wheel chalk, stuff like that they carry around on the trucks. Did y'all have the nader pin question on that? Did y'all Google what it was? Was that the one that asked what you stabilize a vehicle with?
Yep.
No. So the nader pin? So the nader pin is just the little latch on the inside of the door. It's the little round thing that sticks out of your little door frame right there that locks the door into place. That's what it is. I mean, you can try to secure a car with that, but I don't think it's going to be very effective. Yeah, that's kind of what you aim for whenever you're extricating and you're popping doors. You kind of aim for that nader pin because it's got support systems right there. So, so make sure you stabilize the vehicle. If the vehicle's rolled up on its side, and you don't have proper stabilization equipment, be mindful of that. Life over limb. I'm not telling y'all to jump inside unstable cars. If somebody's dying and I need to get them out, Becca will tell you I'll be the first one to jump inside of something I ain't got no business being in. So you do what you're going to do. That's between you and your conscience, but you need to stabilize vehicles before you enter them, right? The fire department has a couple of different stabilization tools. They have these big long poles that they can kind of extend out, shove up against the bottom of the car. It's got a little ratchet strap on there. It just kind of pushes everything together and stabilizes the car so it don't rock back and forth, stuff like that. So if you can wait on them, wait on them. They have a lot more equipment than we do. If you can't, you do what you got to do, and deal with the consequences later. I've been yelled at by supervisors for doing stuff I ain't had no business doing, so it's all right. It's fine. So, and then gaining access to the patient. So, like I said, we have a combi tool, which is a spreader cutter combination. I have pictures of that here in just a second. So, popping doors is that's what you're going to most commonly do to gain access to the patient. Again, you kind of aim for that nadir pin or the door hinges, and just kind of pop those more secure points of that door off, and then you can just kind of pull the door away from it, and you gain access to your patient. Try before you pry. Don't go over there freaking cutting on doors that you can just open up by hand, right? So always try before you pry. Go over there and jiggle the handle, see if you can get the door open on its own, because it's going to make your life a lot easier. So protective equipment, like we just talked about, there's a lot of glass, a lot of sharp objects. Anytime you're working within the hot zone, which is that rescue extrication zone, you need to have on appropriate equipment for that situation. And like I said, helmet, high-vis vest. Even though you may be in bunker gear, it's always recommended to put on a high-vis vest over top of that whenever you're working around traffic on the interstate. So size up. Your scene size up should paint a picture for whoever you have incoming, right? So if I'm the first one on scene on the ambulance, I would generally relay a size up to the fire department, because we, typically beat the fire department there, just because, those guys have to get there and get loaded up. So I'll try to let them know what they're walking into. Be clear about it. Know what you're going to say before you get on the radio, right? Let them know, hey, I got a single vehicle accident, one male heavily entrapped in the vehicle, upside down on its roof. Right now, he's conscious, alert, and oriented. When y'all get here, prepare for extrication. Really quick, really, really simple. That way they know when they get there what they're about to get into, right? Request resources early. If the accident sounds bad, like I said before, just go ahead and call for resources, call for your air resources or whatever you may need. Get those in the air quick, and that way you don't need them later on and haven't called for them. And then recognize and address any hazards quickly. That can range anywhere from the car's engine on fire to, maybe you need to cut the battery cables if you're a part of this extrication. Maybe you need to cut the battery cables. A big one that you got to watch out for is undeployed airbags, as well as, I have a picture up here in a minute, the shock absorbers that's in the bumpers. Be mindful of those. Those are full of like nitrogen, and they will get overheated and explode and take your legs out. So be careful whenever you're approaching these vehicles. So patient safety, a big thing here is keeping patient calm. So me and Becca had an incident in Atlanta where a young lady got tangled up in the guardrail on the interstate. It took the fire department about 45 minutes to get her out of the vehicle just because of how entangled she was. My job for 45 minutes was to sit in the passenger seat, hold her hand, and talk to her. And that's all I did. Poor Becca was running back and forth to the ambulance like a chicken with her head cut off. I got to relax in the passenger seat. But that's part of it, right? So know your roles on these incidents. Sometimes that's all it takes. Sit there, talk to a patient, let them know what's going on, keep them calm. Because if they get all excited and they got a giant piece of guardrail sticking through the leg, they start freaking out, snatching on it. They could, tear the leg up, rip an artery up, and then they'll be dead in a couple of minutes, right? Keep these people calm. If you've never been a part of an extrication, they're very, very loud. There's a lot of stuff going on. Those tools make a lot of loud noises. The metal crumpling makes a lot of loud noises, so keep them calm. Rescue blankets, paper tarps or vinyl coated tarps, sheets, blankets out of the ambulances. Anytime you're cutting on these vehicles, try to cover your patients up some, especially if you run into the type of person that don't want to bust windows before they start cutting on doors and stuff. those windows are going to break at some point when you're cutting on those cars. And so if you have protection on the patient so that they don't end up with a bunch of glass on them, that's always better, right? So airbags, everybody knows what an airbag is. It inflates on impact, tries to absorb that momentum of your body versus the vehicle and kind of disperse that energy out some. Most of the time, most commonly when you get there, if the incident had just happened, these vehicles are going to be covered in like a fog or smoky kind of haze. And that's due to this like cornstarch powder that they use on these airbags. And if I'm not mistaken, I think they're for like preservation purposes so that the material don't break down over time.
I think it helps with whenever it comes out too, it creates like a surface where it doesn't get caught.
Yeah. Yeah. So watch for those. Watch for undeployed airbags. If you're going into the passenger seat of a vehicle and only the driver airbag has deployed, be mindful of that, especially on older vehicles, because whenever they're not like sensor driven like these new vehicles. So if you get hit in the front, both of those airbags are supposed to come out. So if both of them didn't come out, then this one's locked and loaded and ready to go. So be mindful of that as you're entering vehicles like that.
Another thing you might run into with the airbags is that powder is very irritable to people's eyes and stuff. So we ran a lot of calls where they're like, my eyes are burning. It's because of that powder. And the best thing you can do is just rinse them out.
Yep. That stuff is very irritant. They'll get red spots all over their skin. Those airbags they hurt. So, like I was saying, these shock absorbers right here lie in the bumpers of a lot of vehicles. They are filled with nitrogen, and they are there to kind of absorb energy. They will get overheated in an event of a fire. So whenever you're approaching these vehicles, you need to kind of approach it at a 45-degree angle from one side or the other, because I have seen videos, many videos of these things exploding and shooting off the front of vehicles and taking people out of the legs. They will take your legs off if they have enough momentum. So if you see a car on fire, don't just go running up in front of it. Be mindful of that they may happen. So another big issue that we run into is electrical wires. So don't walk up on these vehicles until you know for a fact that electricity is down. However you so choose to do that is up to you, but most of the time we're calling MV Energy out or whoever to come out, check these lines to make sure, tell your patient to stay calm, right? They need to stay where they are until you confirm that these electrical sources are dead. And again, you can look up on YouTube and you'll see 100 videos of some gung-ho person running up here, getting the piss shocked out of them, and then falling over dead right there beside the car. So don't do that. I don't know. I haven't seen a lot of these electrical boxes around here. Do y'all typically have these? No? Is there? So we had them all over the place in Georgia, and people love to run into them. I don't know why. I think they like tried to do the whole Dukes of Hazzard thing. We called them the hangout spot when I was a kid because we all used to go over there and just sit on them and talk crap. But they are also electrically charged. So if you have somebody that runs over one of those and are stuck on top of them, you need to be mindful of that. There are electrical wires inside of those, and they can also shock the piss out of you. And of course, now the big thing is electrical vehicles. So most electrical vehicles will have some sort of cutoff. Tesla will mark these with either like a pair of like little cutters, or they'll put like a little fire department helmet on there or whatever. And that's to let you know that that's where you need to cut that line so that you kill the power to their high voltage electrical wires that run up and down these like A posts and B posts and stuff like that. So you need to look for those if you're ever in an incident where you're running a call on a Tesla or some other form of electrical car. Don't run up and just start cutting on these posts because there's a lot of high voltage electrical wires in there. And again, you'll shock the piss out of yourself. Some of them are right here around this back window. Some of them are up under the hood on the passenger side. If you've never taken one of these electric vehicle extrication classes, they're actually pretty interesting. But yeah, so be mindful of that before you start cutting on cars. So vehicle fires, most appropriately for us, we have a fire extinguisher. Be careful. We had a paramedic in Atlanta who was a full-time firefighter that worked for us part-time that ran up on a vehicle fire in the ambulance, jumped out with a fire extinguisher, started fighting the fire. One of the tires let loose, threw stuff all over the place, burned the piss out of him. He spent a couple months in the burn ICU in Augusta, Georgia. So if you don't have an appropriate attire for this, get close under your own discretion. I wouldn't, but unless I need to get somebody out, I wouldn't. If that vehicle's sitting over there burning by itself and nobody's in it, let it burn. But if you try it, you can try the ABC extinguisher, 15, 20 pound. I think we carry 10 pound extinguishers on our truck. But so these are some of the stabilization equipment that I was talking about. So if you look down here at the bottom of these cars, they have these like step chalks, is what they call them. And they just kind of have little steps. So if you're lifting the car or whatever, you lift it up on airbags and kind of push these little step chalks up under it as you need to. And it kind of helps stabilize it. And then a vehicle up on its side has this kind of pole ratchet strap system to help it from rocking back and forth. So, like I said, if you're running into a situation where a car's upright and you need to stabilize that vehicle, just run around and bust all the tires out of it real fast. And for the most part, it's going to be pretty stable. Now, if it's on a big old hill, probably still not going to be stable. So just use your brain. So these are the most common 3 extrication tools that you'll see. So you have over here on the far right a set of cutters, which are self-explanatory, right? They're used to cut A post, B post, C post. Does everybody know what A post, B post is? So A post is the post by the windshield that starts at the door, goes up. B post sits right here, kind of parallel to your shoulders and goes up kind of right there where your seatbelt is. And then C post is at the trunk, right? So whenever you're dealing with extrication, if you're needing to remove a roof, then that's kind of, you'll use that cutter to pop those posts off. For the most part, you want to cut them as low as you can so you don't have a big old giant piece of metal sticking out of there. But again, you got to be careful. You need to pop those little plastic panels off and be mindful because the seat belts have little gas chambers in those. You can cut through those, and that could be a bad day too. So before you start cutting on vehicles, reach inside, pop the little plastic panels off so you can see what's behind those panels before you start cutting on them. But the spreaders, these are most commonly used, which are the ones in the middle, most commonly used to gain entry to doors. You can do a little bit of dash rolling with them. And then they actually have like purchase points up towards the top near where these teeth are, where these holes are, where you can take chains and stick in there. And they have like a little thing that you put in there to hold chains. Attach a chain to something stable on one side and then put it to like the steering column, and you can roll dashes like that too. And then this ram, if you don't have to get to the point where you need to pull all your chains out and stuff, your ram's most commonly used again for rolling dashes. You just shove it up under the dash, find a good purchase point, and kind of push it up out of your way. And then the combi tool is a mixture of the spreader and cutter both. It has a cutter down low and a spreader up high. So we can do mild amount of extrication. Again, it's going to get you out of small pickles. It's not going to get you out of something that's really, really in depth. So So additional considerations. So rapid extrication versus controlled extrication. What do you think would be the big difference between these two situations? Right. So if I run up, we get paged out to a car accident down the street, and I get there, the engine's on fire, the cab's filling up with smoke. I'm gonna run up there, bust a window out, and snatch somebody out of a car. Right. At that point, it's life over limb, and you're trying to get them out of that situation. A controlled extrication is kind of what you're looking at, where even though your patient may be a little borderline unstable, but they're entangled pretty well. But there's no fire hazards, there's no immediate threat to what's going on. Maybe you need to be a little bit more controlled about what you're doing, methodical about it, so that you don't worsen that patient's condition by, snatching them out of a car and, maybe their legs wrapped up in a piece of metal and now you just cut their femoral artery and now they're dead, right? So again, try before you pry. Don't walk up just trying to cut on cars because you can. Try to open doors. If you need to gain quick access to a patient with a lot of front end damage, normally you can get in through the back door. If you can't get through either door, bust out the back window first, so that you can kind of gain access to that patient, put a sheet over them, and then bust out the front window. Again, barring no immediate life threats like the car is on fire. And then, like I said, don't cut before you check. So don't cut on these A posts, B posts, whatever. Don't go over there just cutting on stuff before you look at what you're cutting at. Again, I've seen people, not personally, on videos where they go over there and cut right there around that seatbelt area, and they got that little gas chamber in there that will explode. So be mindful of what you're cutting on, especially when it comes to these electrical cars. Pop those little panels off. Just reach in there. They're pretty easy. You can reach in there with a knife most of the time, or whatever you got, screwdriver, and just pop them, and they'll come off. You don't want to be cutting on stuff you ain't got no business cutting on and get yourself hurt. So, any questions?
Yeah, on the Teslas, their handles, their handles go away. Just break the window.
Yeah, at that point, I'm just popping their door off. Frick, I don't even know how to open a Tesla that's just sitting in a parking lot. You gotta do the thing with your hand. I don't freaking know. Huh?
The batteries on the Teslas.
Yeah.
They just burn and burn.
Yeah, so I did when I was still with the fire department, I did a class on electric vehicles back, I don't know, freaking 8 years ago. And when Teslas or those cars with those big lithium batteries catch on fire, they just take and they drop them in a big pond because they'll just sit there and burn and burn.
Did you talk about when most accidents happen in emergency medicine or in emergency response vehicles?
I did last week when I said you're responding to calls through intersections. Yeah.
Okay.
A little
I remember
video.
seeing the question, but I wanted to make sure. I didn't know if it was on
Yeah.
the next test or this.
Who's at fault? The bastard not paying attention. All right. This is it. It has all come down to this. 41 chapters of just greatness and glory. Is everybody excited? No. I really kind of wish that they would just get all these out the first couple of weeks, be done with it, and then you move on to all the cool stuff and you end on something cool. I don't know, freaking delivering babies. Yeah, I'm just kidding. That also sucks.
Cool.
So, EMS response to terrorism. So we're going to define terrorism, review time, distance, and shielding, and then overview of weaponization. I can tell you right now, I've looked through this PowerPoint multiple times and I can't pronounce half the words. So I don't know what to tell you. Just I didn't make it very far in English, so dropped out. So the definition of terrorism: the unlawful use of force or violence against persons or property to intimidate or coerce a government, the civilian population, or any segments thereof, in furtherance of political or social objectives. Got it? People blow stuff up, make people sick, terrorist.
Thank you for coming to our TED Talk.
Thank you for coming to TED Talk. So we have two different groups of terrorism: domestic terrorist. These can range anywhere from people that run up and spray paint Tesla signs all over the place, which is considered an act of terrorism, right? Like they're going out and doing trying to gain their political point, and so they're running around destroying property, right? It seems minute because it's just spray paint and a couple of cars, but it is acts of terrorism, which are domestic acts of terrorism. And then it can range all the way up to the Oklahoma City bombing, or 9/11 was an international, but as far as domestic goes, right? So you have a wide range of terrorism and a wide range of things that can kind of fall into this category. And then, of course, international terrorism. So obviously, we know internationally you're looking at incidents like 9/11, the Pentagon, stuff like that. So essentially, all you're looking at is a group of people that have a goal that fits their agenda, whether it be politically, these like extreme religious groups, whatever that may be. They are working towards causing chaos or destruction based off of their agenda and their ideologies, right? So, incidents of terrorism. So this CBRNE, so these are just different agents in which terrorism can be involved. So you have chemical agents, biological agents, radiological agents, nuclear, and explosives. So any one of these or any combination of these can be used domestically or in international terrorism. And they're also known as weapons of mass destruction, right? Whenever they are used in that manner. So, emergency responders, they are often targets in these situations. You need to be mindful if you are ever involved in an incident involving possible terrorism. Most commonly, there are secondary devices that will be placed for the first responders that are responding. So that is a big, big issue, and you need to be mindful of that. So secondary devices, multiple devices. Does anybody watch Criminal Minds? I love that show. It's like my favorite show. I've watched every episode. But anyway, they have an episode on this, right, where basically the initial act of terrorism was just kind of a bring everybody here and everybody show up, and then a secondary device there to attack the first responders, which ended up being their attack was on the hospital. So be mindful of that, right? So this is another little acronym, AUTO. So recognizing these incidences where they're happening may give you kind of like context clues of what's going on and kind of put you on high alert. So occupancy or location, type of event, timing of event, and then on-scene warning signs. So symbolic or historical targets, public buildings or assembly areas, controversial businesses, Tesla, right? And infrastructure systems. So if you're getting paged out to something that sounds suspicious at, the Civic Center, and there's a big group of people there, you need to be mindful of that, right? Types of events: explosions, MCIs, or active shooter incidents, and then non-trauma mass casualty incidents, which is most commonly kind of like your biological agents and stuff, where you get there initially and you just got like a lot of sick people, but there's no explosions, no gunfire, no trauma, anything like that. And then timing of event: national holidays, anniversary dates of previous attacks. So if you look at like Waco, Texas, and the Oklahoma City bombing, so the raid on Waco and the Oklahoma City bombing were on the same date, 2 years apart, I think is what it was. 93, 95, I think is when that happened. No, nobody else likes this stuff. Freaking yeah.
Wow.
Child. Yeah, so I think it's 93, 95, right? Incidents occurring in major public areas at busy points and business days. And again, so if you go back and look, like the Olympic bombing that happened in Atlanta, the marathon bombing, like outside of like 9/11, like people aren't just out there blowing stuff up on a random Tuesday. Normally they're associated with mass gatherings and events, right? So on scene warning signs: unexplained patterns of illness and death. So if you roll up on scene and you got 20 people that's like really sick for no real reason, they're, gushing fluids out of their ears, nose, and mouth, and that probably should be a pretty high index of suspicion that you got some stuff going on that you probably don't want to get on you, right? Unexplained signs, symptoms: skin, eyes, airway, and then containers that appear out of place. If I got a 50-gallon drum sitting down here in the middle of the road in front of the courthouse, calling them. I'm not going out there, right? So if you can't really explain when it's there, be mindful of that on these incidents. So thermal harm, again, another acronym, TRACE MP, which basically is just common harms from these incidents, resulting from these incidents. So thermal harm, extreme heat or cold, which can come from explosions, massive fires, whatever that may be. Radiological harm, so the alpha particles, beta, gamma, all these different particles can get in your skin and really frick you up. Have you ever watched Chernobyl, the TV show? Freaking show's up. It's great. I really got to work on your history. Jeez. So asphyxiation, this can either be a man-made chemical agent, or it can be secondary to like an explosion, the particles in the air, stuff like that. And then chemical harm, toxic or corrosive materials, etiological harm caused by the disease, and it affects your own personal systems, which I guess all of them do. Mechanical harm caused by physical trauma. So these are all the different types of situations you may be presented with in a terrorist attack. And then psychological harm, which occurs during the incident and after. A lot of PTSD from like 9/11. People have been talking about it for years, and the stuff that they've been dealing with. So this goes for first responders and bystanders. So what you want to do is you limit your time in these environments, right? So if you get there and people are spitting fluids out from all over the place, limit your time there, right? If I walk up and I see a bunch of zombie people running around, I'm not going to be there for very long, right? And then I'm going to run away and increase my distance, right? I don't want to be there spitting up fluids with everybody else, right? This is where your ERG books come in handy. Honestly, unless there's like a freaking tanker truck in the middle of the road that's got a big old cyanide sticker on the side of it, like you're not really gonna know what these are most of the time. But maybe the terrorists decided to placard their bombs. I don't know. And then use shielding. Appropriate shielding, cars, buildings, whatever you can get behind. If you're dealing with like radiological terrorist attacks, obviously that shielding needs to change based off of what that may be, because radiation travels through things, right? So response to terrorist incidents. So chemical agents can include industrial chemical or warfare type chemicals. So if these people are making homemade bombs out of pipe cleaner and stuff like that, it could be something simple like that. Or like what was that gas they were dropping in? Was it sarin gas?
Oh, yeah, like the nerve gas.
Yeah, stuff like that when they were dropping them in wars, nerve gases, stuff like that. So thermal harm, asphyxiation, chemical harm, mechanical harm. Again, this could be like bombs and stuff, kind of weakening structures. And then psychological harm. So again, wear your PPE, respirators. We'll go over the different types of level of PPE that you may need for these incidents, but make sure if you're there and you're involved that you're wearing stuff, because that was a big issue with Chernobyl, right? Was they had a bunch of people in the area working, they didn't know how bad it was, and then a year later they're freaking half dead, and all these people start dying off. So whenever you're dealing with this stuff, make sure you're dressed appropriately. So yeah, the little mail, they were mailing it to the president and all that stuff. Yeah, they were like, y'all gotta be careful opening the mail. I'm like, bro, we live in freaking Macon, Georgia, and you're a freaking police officer. Nobody's sending you anthrax, Dad. So chemical agent considerations. So it can be gas, it can be liquids, can be solid. They may have a low boiling point, high vapor pressures. So sometimes they will build these chemical agents to disperse easily, because more airborne travel, more patients. On the flip side, maybe they make something a little bit differently, and now this fog is settling kind of on the ground, and now everybody that's in that immediate area is in a pretty significant threat zone. So the most common entry for these are going to be airborne, because they'll disperse these out, and then everybody will just be walking around breathing, and then people start collapsing all over the place. Same thing if you mix like certain cleaners. That is a chemical agent, where if you mix certain cleaners, you burn your airway, stuff like that. So classification of chemicals: choking agents, respiratory agents, blistering agents, cyanides, nerve agents. We've talked about most of these. I don't really know the last time they've used like nerve agents, like on mass populations.
What's a very common nerve agent that's used on like farming in farms? Does anybody know? Yeah, does anyone know the certain type of pesticide that it is? It's called an organophosphate. So we actually had a call in Idaho, where I don't know if you all know where Parma, Idaho is, but they have one of those big drive-in theaters up there, and everyone's there, watching their little movie. Well, there's a field next to it. They sprayed some organophosphate on the field, but the air caught it, or the wind caught it and got everybody. So there's an acronym to remember, like some of these nerve agents, like some of their signs and symptoms. And so we actually carry an antidote for it on the ambulance. That's the biggest one that they really harp on in your textbook, is the organophosphate nerve agent. The parasympathetic nervous system basically is what it affects. So It'll be on the next slide
The old
or
sludge.
the slide after that. Yeah.
And then riot control agents like tear gas, pepper spray, stuff like that are all chemical compounded agents that are used for a purpose.
What's a lacrimator? What is lacrimation? Yeah. Makes you cry. Lacrimation is tearing.
So this is the acronym that she was talking about. This is what I've been talking about when I say people are spitting fluids out of all their orifices. So what is lacrimation? All right. Incontinence or urination, diarrhea, GI cramps, pain that may lead to vomiting, right? What's emesis? And then what's meiosis? Yeah. Constricting of the pupils.
Mm-hmm. So think about what your parasympathetic system does to your body, right? So let's talk about sympathetic. What happens when you're sympathetic? Everything gets elevated. So your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure goes up, your pupils dilate, right? And so if your parasympathetic system's in overdrive because of this cholinergic response, it's going to be the opposite of your sympathetic, right? So what are you going to see? Constricted pupils. What's going to happen to their heart rate? Lower. Yeah. GI, everything starts leaking. So remember, rest and digest is your parasympathetic. So everything's digesting a little bit too well. So everything's going to start coming out.
That's where you start seeing people leaking from all their orifices. If you roll up and you see 20 people throwing up, pooping, pissing, going down get.
Ooh.
So,
Oh, it's way gone. Don't even worry about it.
oh, it's back there by Mr. Bale.
Yeah.
All right, biological incidents. If I'm not mistaken, there are theories out there about COVID and possible biological terrorism. So, public health emergencies, they are sudden demands on the public health infrastructure with no apparent explanation. Bacteria, viruses, and toxins. These are going to be your most common biological incidents. So again, right, like when COVID happened, COVID's a virus. Now all of a sudden we have an overwhelming shutdown of our healthcare systems. So what is an exposure? So the dose is essentially how much of that you're getting, right? So milligram per kilogram, right? So like for me, if I'm dosing somebody with ketamine and I want to give them 1 milligram per kilogram, right? Like that's my dose. And then your concentration is parts per million. And so this is how much is kind of entering your body. So again, for us, like our concentration for ketamine is like 500 milligrams in 10 mLs, right? So your dose and your concentration is essentially what you're getting out of that substance, whatever that may be, right? So your routes of entry, absorption, ingestion, injection, and inhalation are very common with the medications we give, right? Because we have medications that you can absorb, right? Like nitro patches or fentanyl patches, stuff like that. Ingestion, injection, and then inhalation, right? So, and then contamination. A material is present where it does not belong. So, like we talked about last week in the hazmat incidents, right? You don't want to contaminate things that don't or aren't supposed to be contaminated. So you want to make sure these patients are well deconned, and before they get in the back of your apparatuses, before they go wherever they're going, make sure they're well deconned. That way, you're not contaminating things that don't need to be contaminated. So, primary concern is personal protection. So, I really this whole PowerPoint drives me nuts. But bacteria are small free living organisms. So like we were saying before, anthrax, Q fever, the plague, viruses, smallpox, viral hemorrhagic fevers. So viruses are organisms that require a host cell to continue to live and produce within your body. And then toxins. So ricin, staphylococcal enterotoxin B, introtoxin B. Yeah, that was good, huh? Yeah, that was a big word. The only reason why I knew that was because I said it earlier. But essentially, like staph, staph, right? So features influences use as weapons. What the frick is that supposed to say?
Features influence as weapons. So the reason that these have a high influence as to be used as a weapon would be because of their infectivity, their virulence, how easy it is for them to spread, how toxic are they. Those are all things that are going to be because like if we deal with something that's a biologic agent, right? It's not like you're going to get toned out to the civic center for a biological agent attack. This is something like COVID where it's all of a sudden everybody's getting really sick. Nobody really knows exactly what it is. There's a stress on the system. And so that's why if someone was to use something like this, that would be kind of like their selling point. Like, yep, we're going to use a biologic agent because this incubation time is two weeks or whatever it may be. Everybody's going to get sick. It's going to put a stress on the system. And then now, it's not like a big explosion and everything happens right here all at once. It's kind of a slow building thing that can spread. So,
got it. Yeah. So,
the ability of it to like go around, like spread.
So contamination, whether it be external or internal, exposures occurs when substance is taken into the body through one of the routes of exposure. So the permeation is that substance's ability to move through a substance or at a molecular level. So when you're dealing with substances and you have like a whole body exposure, it really determines how much of that substance you're going to get based off of the permeation of that substance, right? Like how well it moves through your system and how well you can absorb that, whatever that agent may be. So a couple of chemical and biological weapons. So again, with these like nerve agents, like sarin gas, blistering agents like mustard gas, choking agents, chlorine's a big one, and hydrogen chlorine, cyanogen chloride. So be careful with these, especially living in an area where we live, where we have a lot of mines and stuff. I know a lot of mines and stuff use chlorine for certain things. Semi trucks carry this stuff. If you have an accident with a semi truck carrying a bunch of chlorine, that can be a bad day. So don't get too close to these agents. Again, it reverts back to the hazmat situation. And then riot control agents. These are just kind of like a generalized idea of kind of what you're looking at with different agents and some examples of different agents. So these are your levels of hazmat suits. So level A hazmat suits will have everything within itself. So we'll have an internal respirator. Everything will be confined because they don't want you to contaminate anything. So whenever you get through with this, you'll take off all these suits. That way you don't have to worry about any sort of internal
Contamination.
Yep. There it is. So level B suits, really the only difference is the external and internal versions of the suits, right? So if you notice on the level B suits, they're a little bit smaller, not as bulky, and you have some external sources of air, and then you have like an external mask. These level A suits will have a big shield, and so your mask will sit inside that shield. Like I said, these level A's are completely internal. The level B's have some external properties. The level C is just like a HEPA filter, or some sort of mask filter that kind of, can purify that air as you're breathing it, but it's not within a self-containing breathing apparatus, which is what these two are. This air that they're breathing are self-containing breathing apparatuses, or SCBAs, and they just recert air. You have limited amount of air, and so once you run out, it starts yelling at you, and you got to get out and get out of your suit before you run completely out. Level C and level D are basic kind of contamination zones or contamination equipment, and you're not limited on what you have on your back. So prioritize your protective measures. Keep a friend around. Buddy system. Self-protection, rapid intervention teams, and then civilian protection. So you want to make sure all your zones are set up. You're ready to treat and transport patients as soon as possible. And then you want to keep the general public safe. And so radiological and nuclear incidents. Small nuclear devices like suitcase bombs, they're stockpiled in foreign nations, apparently. They just run around, drop a little backpack somewhere or a suitcase somewhere, it blows up. And then radiological dispersion devices, such as like dirty bombs, are meant for mass casualty incidents. These suitcase bombs are more isolated to the surrounding area and first responders, especially if they're high compact with, radiological material or some sort of nuclear agent. They're just going to kind of hit a small radius. And then, of course, these dirty bombs are meant for mass casualty incidents. They're meant to cause mass destruction. And then a lot of these, like dirty bomb incidents, people that are miles and miles away may not have effects right there. But then 3 or 4 days later, they start getting sick. 2 or 3 months down the road, now they're looking at death's door, right? So they're more practical. And they're harder to detect. Radiation cannot be detected unless you have one of these scopometers.
Geiger meter.
There you go. The little Geiger meter. Have anybody ever seen the Geiger meters? You like walk up and they're like, and they make a bunch of friggin' unnecessary noise.
A little clicky sound.
Huh?
They make a little clicky sound.
Yeah. So, radiological
like it.
agents. Huh?
Yeah. He made the sound from it.
Oh, you made the little clicky sound?
There it is.
No, the little handheld ones make the little sound too. You never seen the little handheld ones that you walk up and they give you a little number and like, we'll find it.
Yeah.
You'll see it. So time distance shielding, radiological detecting equipment helps determine effectiveness of measures. So again, you don't know how big that exposure is because these radiological agents, you can't just walk up and smell them, right? So you don't know how effective that agent is until you get the appropriate equipment out and actually measure the radiological levels in that area. So radioactive devices, potential scenarios. So military nuclear devices, everybody's always scared of the big nuclear war. Improvised nuclear devices, and then the dirty bombs. Effects on radiation. So this breaks down your bone systems, a lot like like a osteoporosis patient. It'll break down your bone systems, tear apart your GI system, and then shut down your central nervous system. And depending on the level of radiation that you were exposed to, you will end up in a very dead state real quick. This guy. So Becca looked this up, and they kept this guy alive for like 8 months,
It was like
80
80 something days.
80 something days.
It was in China, so probably research purposes.
He's just in there
Or
begging.
Japan, somewhere over there.
Yeah, he was like begging to be put down, and yeah, that doesn't look like a fun time. I would haunt everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So this is something that I have seen pop up on National Registry a handful of times when it comes to what is the most powerful versus what is the weakest type of radiation. So alpha, beta, gamma, and neutrons. So as you can see, alpha rays can be stopped very easily by like a piece of paper. Beta rays, gamma rays, right? And then neutrons. So that's where it comes. That's where the distancing and appropriate cover come into place. Because if somebody has gotten their hands on like some gamma rays, you standing behind, a door probably ain't going to do much for you. So you need to put some distance and cover between you and whatever that is. Explosion incidents. So they can range anywhere from small pipe bombs to situations like the Oklahoma City bombing, where the guy filled up a whole van full of manure and made a big old boom and took down most of the building, right? So these are going to be involved in like fixed objects and or a group of people, such as the Boston Marathon bombing, where they just kind of went out there and dropped a couple backpacks in large groups of people and kind of targeted those large groups. They may be designed to disperse biological, chemical, or radiological materials. And like I stated before, that's where the dispersion properties come in. Either it's going to go up in the air and disperse out and kill a bunch of folks, or maybe those vapors kind of settle down on the ground and just kind of sit and target whatever those massive groups are nearby, and then the first responders coming in to help. So types of patients that you're going to be running into here: thermal patients, obviously, due to the explosion. Asphyxiation, again, it could be due to dusty chemicals and or the substance that's within this bomb. Chemical, mechanical, and then psychological. Again, whoever was in the surrounding area and or the first responders that responded to these calls. So again, self-protection, pre-blast, and post-blast self-protection. You just have to be careful in these incidents, have a high index of suspicion. Hopefully you have some sort of warning going into these incidents. You may not, and you may get paged out for, a mass casualty incident, and then you get there and you realize a bunch of bombs go out. So your blast injuries, again, I have seen this on National Registry, so pay attention to it. So your primary injuries are going to happen in your hollow organs. The pressure from that initial blast is going to affect your hollow organs the most: ruptured eardrums, you get the blast lung, collapsed lungs, and then bowel perforations. And then secondary, sometimes these people will either stuff things into these objects and or put them in close proximity to something that may explode and turn into shrapnel. And then blunt trauma and fractures, which are the tertiary effects. Quaternary. I can't ever say these words. I told y'all I can't pronounce half these words. But burns, asphyxiation, toxic substances, and then the last of those would be the chemical burns, radiations, and infections that are going to come on kind of down the road a little ways. So the action of spreading something, dissemination, right? So respiratory routes is the most common and effective way to disperse these agents biologically. And again, it comes down to whether they're going to disperse them vapor high or vapor low. Packaging and weaponization is the packaging or producing of material so it can be used as a weapon. Everybody got that part?
Say that again.
Weaponization is the packaging or producing of material so it can be used as a weapon. I don't want to hear later that somebody didn't hear that. So they're most effective when targeted through inhalation. Again, particles 3 to 5 microns in diameter. Airborne dissemination is created by applying energy to a material. And that's, again, when you blow something up and you got all the little air particles floating around all over the place. Heat explosions and sprayers can aerosolize materials. So me and Becca were talking about this earlier as far as aerosolize materials go. So like if somebody took a chemical agent that they were trying to use for a terrorist attack. Has anybody ever seen those mosquito sprayers that ride down the road and spray the stuff out of the top? They could use something like that, right? Because that aerosols and turns that into a fine mist, and now you're breathing that in as they're driving down the road, right? So that's going to cause you a lot of big problems. So strategy and tactics. If you have the ability to look into ERG books and use those to kind of try to figure out what you're dealing with, that's great. Specific operational actions responders take to accomplish these assigned tasks. So your strategies are just kind of like your overall plans, and then your tactics are what you're trying to accomplish with those plans, right? So your initial consideration, controlling the scene, isolating the hazards, and attempting to conduct control evacuations. So like we said in the hazmat class, anybody that comes out of these incidents are considered contaminated until proven otherwise, right? So we want to control these incidents. We don't want to just show up and tell everybody to leave the area. We want to control where they're going and kind of isolate the people that were in the area just in case there is some sort of biological agent involved and these people are contaminated, right? So establish perimeter control, which will most commonly be set up by law enforcement. They'll go out and set up a bit of perimeter. Again, hot zones, cold zones, right? So considerations, your initial size up, request additional resources, establish your staging area, and then immediately report suspicious people and or activities. So if you see something that you think doesn't look right, you need to report it. So decom processes like we went through in the hazmat, removing the contamination, most commonly is going to be in these little pools with a bunch of water hoses. And then your C size up, you're going to protect yourself, kind of look at your scene. If you see things out of place, a bunch of dead vegetation that shouldn't be there, a bunch of dead people or animals, kind of back away from that and reevaluate what you're doing. Don't rush in. Again, we've talked about it. There may be secondary devices that are there to target first responders. And then search for patients. These explosions can knock people away from that explosion. And so you need to search the area really well to make sure you've got a count on everybody that was involved. And then future trends. So as things have progressed in this world, cyber terrorism is a big problem. Didn't we have a cyber attack a handful of years ago? Did they have one here? No? So we had one in Jackson County at the old ambulance service that I worked at. Me and Becca worked at, and they were very secure with their computer systems after that. They held them ransom, held their whole system ransom for $20 million. I was like, we're not giving it back. So Again, still terrorism because they're causing mass chaos and panic. Active shooters, mass shooters are becoming a more common scenario. And then the use of drugs, of abuse as chemical weapons. So, people lacing common street drugs with things is becoming a more common issue. So be mindful of all of those as you're running these calls. Is all of it clear as mud? So
When's your novel gonna be,
I don't know what they say, like I don't even think it was that soon. I thought it was like 1,000 years. It was something stupid. Chernobyl to be inhabitable again.
they're really like, they don't have ice over there?
I don't think anybody even lives anywhere close to that place. They said if you go out there, though, they got some pretty weird animals running around out there.
Yeah, there's like Chernobyl dogs.
Yeah, and freaking deer.
They got like extra toes and shit. Yeah.
All right. So, how does it feel?
Nerve-wracking, yeah.
How does it feel to be done with the lectures?
More anxiety. Yeah.
Well, I can tell you, the test that we have given y'all, I've said it 100 times, is just a small inkling of what you have to look forward to on June 6th. And I say that to encourage you to study, work hard. You've made it through, at this point, almost 3 months of lectures and tests and homework and everything else, right? The homework is pretty much done at this point. We may do like 1 or 2 more assignments here or there, just kind of keep your brain working, but the homework's done for the most part. Honestly, I'm super happy with how this class has turned out. For the majority, our class average is sat at an 89, 90 the entirety of this class, which is impressive. We have lost 1 person in this class since the day we started, which is, Becca will tell you, is almost unheard of.
It's unheard of. We were expecting like 7 to 10 people to leave.
We were expecting to graduate probably 14 or 15 people out of this class, and we're going to graduate 21 out of it. And we started with 22. So I'm super proud of everybody here. Y'all have done great. We appreciate all y'all's time. We appreciate everybody's effort.
We're so proud of y'all.
I'll be more proud if y'all pass national registry. No, but y'all have done good.